We're going to talk about modifying the light now. And I want to talk about off-camera flash options, light modifiers, and we're also going to, in a little bit after this, we're going to do some samples of front light, side light, different light modifiers, and how things work to sort of understand how to paint light. Okay, so this is going to be a blast. We have just about 45 minutes to go through this, so we're gonna go this at a nice clip. It's going to be cool. Okay, so what we're going to do here is first talk about different flash options for getting flashes off the camera. And so probably one of the most popular ways to do this is to use what's called infrared or line of sight. And so there are a lot of cameras that have pop-up flashes. This one doesn't have one, but there's a little pop-up flash, and those specifically on Nikon cameras. Those flashes can send signals to remote flashes. And so there are a lot of newer Canon flashes that do this as well, our cameras. And so I know the 70 and some other cameras have this built in where you can go into the menus and you can say turn on a commander and it can control flashes. So there are a few cameras that do that, not all of them. So what we're going to talk about specifically is the stuff that we can do with all of our cameras. Okay? So if you own one of those cameras that has a remote controller on it, then that's awesome. You're sort of ahead of the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start by talking about the Nikon options. Okay? And there are options I know for Olympus and for Sony and Nikon and Canon, and there's so many different variations. We just can't go through all of them. So we're going to stick with two of the most common. So on a Nikon, what you can do is there is a switch that says on, remote, and master. And so if you want to control a remote flash, you can do it like this. You put one of your Nikon flashes on your camera, and you set it to master. Okay? And on the back, you're going to get these things that say M, A, B, C. And what it's saying there is M stands for the master flash, this flash that's on the camera. And it has a mode, just like we're going to find out the different modes. So you can set your master flash to TTL mode, master mode, and all the other modes that we have. And then also on A, B, and C, what that's saying is on the remote flashes, and this is true of Canon and Nikon, you can set the remote flash to a channel and a zone. Okay, let me talk about the two differences between channels and zones. Let's say that we're shooting an event. So Colby and I, we're shooting an event. And when I take my pictures, I want to take pictures and use my remote flashes, and I want to control them, but I don't want Colby to control my flashes. But guess what? Colby's going to also be shooting this same event. He also has remote flashes, and he wants to be able to control his flashes. So I would set mine on channel 1. You'd put yours on channel 2, and now I can shoot with mine. You can shoot with yours. We're not interfering with each other. Everything's all good. Okay, that could be at a sporting event, it could be at a wedding, it could be at, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, so channels can be used for different setups. Okay, different channels. Zones are different. So what zones do, let's say I have this flash, and I want it to be my key light. Okay, and we're going to go through a 3-light setup when we get to portraits tomorrow. But let's say we want this to be the main light, and I want to control this independent of everything else. I might set this one on zone A. And so on my flash here, this thing that says A is allowing me to control this flash. So I can change the flash exposure compensation for this flash, and I can change the mode for this flash. And if I have this guy, maybe as a kicker light, I can put that one on zone B. So when I'm controlling zone A, it's controlling all the flashes that are set to zone A, but it's not controlling anything on zone B. And so I can control different flashes on my channel separate from each other. That makes sense? So let's give another example. Let's say we're shooting a wedding, and you can have 3 zones, A, B, C. But let's say we're doing a wedding, and there's the table at the front, bride and groom. There's the bride's friends and family, all that kind of stuff. The groom's friend and family, all that kind of stuff. And I have 3 different lighting setups. I have some lights mounted to fill the bride and groom. I've got some lights for this side of the table and lights for this side of the table. I don't want all of them to fire all the time. So what I could do is set those to zones, A, B, C on my channel. Maybe Colby has some on a different channel. And I can say, okay, bride and groom are doing whatever. Put those on A. And I can turn off all the other ones on C or B and C. Click, click, click. It's only those flashes firing. Maybe I tell these to still fire, but at a lower level. So you can see how these zones really help out. You could also do something, maybe you have those lights set up for the table, but you also have lights set up for the dance. And maybe this one is channel 1, A, B, and C, and the dance is channel 2. So you can start to see how, if you're a millionaire and have a bunch of flashes. But no, there are a lot of event and wedding photographers that will have a big pack of speed lights. I'm sure you've seen blogs where it's like, okay, here's my 15 speed lights. It's not uncommon to do that. And so you can see how you can start to control these flashes, get them all set up, and do some things that are pretty spectacular. Okay, so channels, zones, master flash. Okay, the master flash, here's something that's important. If this is the master flash, right, and I'm taking a picture, and I'm taking a picture of something over here, and I want to control how that light looks, and so I've taken my flashes off my camera so I can get all these things that we're about to talk about to be perfect. Do I want this to fire now? Probably not, because it sort of defeats the purpose. So what you can do with your master flash is you can tell it to be on, so on the M on your Nikon people, you can go in here and you can hit select. It selects that. And again, this is different for every different Nikon flash there is, so you have to look at yours specifically. But when you hit select, it will say, is it TTL? You can change the mode from TTL to off to manual to different things. So you can tell this flash, you know what? Act as a commander, but don't fire. Just tell other people what to do. Don't actually flash. And so that allows you to use this just to control other flashes, but not interfere with the light. Okay? So that's how you do a Nikon. You just turn it on master, and then you can go into those different zones and do anything. With the remote, what you do is instead of putting that on master, you put it on remote. Very simple. And then what you do is then you can go in here and you can select the group or the zone. So I guess Nikon calls them groups, not zones. You can select the group. You can say, I want this to be on group A or B or C. So that's how you tell the different flashes what they belong to. You can hit select again. You can tell it what channel you want it on, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then you can go down and you can set things like the zoom and all those different kinds of things that you might need to do. So that's how you do that. Now, one of the things with the way that these work, it's line of sight. And so there are bursts of light that control these. Okay, so this guy actually sends out signals by flashing in certain ways. This has to be able to see this. They have to be able to see. Or what you can do is if you're inside, a lot of times those signals can bounce off walls. But what happens is you start to get problems when you add things like umbrellas and soft boxes, because if you have a big soft box or an umbrella, let's just open this guy up, and you have this on an umbrella adapter, which I'll show you, and you want it to go that way, look what happens. Now this can't see that. And so you might have misfires. We were battling that quite a bit last night. And so I don't know if you tuned in last night, you saw Kelsey struggling to try to grab those flashes and twist them around and get them to point the right way and use the right bracket. So that's why radio triggers are really, really nice. We're going to get to those in a little bit. Okay, Nikon, that's how you set that up. There is an option that I really like. Instead of using a really expensive flash as the master, you can also get this SU800, and it is a controller without the flash. And its job is to just control remote flashes. So you can put that on there. This is called the Nikon SU800, and you can turn that on, and it has basically the same readout, where you can select different zones, set different channels, change the modes, all that kind of stuff. This is what I prefer if I'm using that system, is just to have this guy, because it's all right there ready for me to go, and it's really, really easy to use. Okay, so that's the Nikon stuff. Canon, it's very, very similar. So on the older Canons, and this is one of my grumps with Canon, I love it because nobody can figure out if I'm a Canon person or a Nikon person, right? Like, what are you? Which one do you like? I'm not telling. Okay, so with Canon, on the older ones, you have master and slave. Okay, you just turn it on master. So you turn it on. You could say turn on master, and it would say, okay, I'm ready to go. Turn on slave. I'm ready to hear. That's all good. So it was this switch down here that I thought was really intuitive. On the newer ones, let me get a Canon flash. Where's my Canon flash? There he is. Too many flashes. What you can do is, it is hidden. So on the newer Canon flashes, it's over where it says zoom. So you guys see that on your flash, it says zoom. If you push and hold, you'll see that all of a sudden your flash starts saying off and it's blinking. Okay, what it's saying is, and it's got this little symbol that has a little radio signal there. What you're doing is it's asking if you want to turn on the remote or the master. And so you can jog this to the right, your little control wheel, and you'll see it first says master on. If you hit set, now it's going to be a master, and it can control things. And then what you can do to change the channels and stuff, you have to push these little buttons here. I'm sorry, this is what I love. So you have to hit the zoom button once, twice. Once you hit it twice, you can see that there's ratio control. Hit it 3 times, you can change the channel. Hit it 4 times, you can tell if you want this flash to fire or not. Hit it 5 times, you're back to the beginning. So this reminds me of those watches that you used to get in like the 70s and 80s, where if you lost the instruction manual and didn't know like the different switch like configure your hose. So that's what I wish, I haven't seen the new 600, but I hope that's fixed. With newer Canon cameras, those controls, you can get to those in the menu of your camera itself. So that's one of the big benefits of newer Canon cameras, is that is it 1 or 2 pushes or 3 pushes, or which one is it? That sort of goes away. So just note it, to get into the remote and master control, you hit the zoom button. That's why that little symbol is there for, that's radio. You push and hold it, and then you can turn things on. And then to change things, you push it again, and you can see it starts flashing, and it gives you those options to change things around, okay? So that's how you turn on the master mode. What about turning on the remote? And if I push zoom and hold it, what I can do is I can turn it on, instead of having it on master, I can turn it on, it's called slave. I can hit set. And now when I hit my zoom button repeatedly, I can set the channel and I can set the zone, and that allows me to do that. So with Canon, all the functionality of setting master and slave is in the little zoom button and the dial. With a Nikon, it's just on the switch that says master remote. Okay, so that's how that works. And essentially, once you know how to set up the master and the remote, the master and the slave, they work the same between Canon and Nikon. And then Canon has something that's really cool. It's called an Ste2. It's this guy right here. And it's the same thing that I just showed you with the Nikon. It's a dedicated controller. And so it's pretty easy. You just slip it on there and turn it on, and it's ready to go. And on this one, it allows you to turn on ratio control. What that allows you to do is, if you have 2 flashes, you can have some on zone A, some on zone B, and you can switch the power between them. So it doesn't give you the ability to set if they're on manual, or you can't do specific, you can't dial in things specifically like you can with the Nikon. And so as far as the remote control functionality between these two, the Nikon is far more robust, unless you have a newer Canon camera with the menus and stuff built in, which is why people rejoiced over that, because it's really nice. You can do that in there. Or what you can do is on the 580EX2, if you use that as your controller, then you can do some of those remote adjustments there. And so it's not apples to apples between the SU800 and the Ste2. So they don't do exactly the same things. Okay, before we go on to other options to get the flash off the camera, what questions do we have?
All right, so a question from our friend Sam Cox, who always has the best questions. Thank you, Sam. He's in Loveland, Colorado. With several flash units on different zones, do you label or color code your flashes to help you remember which is on which zone?
We, yes and no. So I have lots of different pieces of equipment, and you'll notice that there are pieces of colored tape on lots of different things. And the reason for that is some of it is mine, some of it is on loan, some of it is rental, some of it's my friends that I've borrowed. And so we have to label who owns what so we don't get our stuff mixed up. Because we have 3 people here today that also have 580 EX2s. So we do label our gear as far as who owns what. And I have an agreement with studios in Phoenix, and I know what tape they use, what color tape, and so we don't use their colors of tape for ownership. So we know like Loft 19, blue. That's what they have. So all their stuff is blue. Our stuff is red. Stuff that Nikon owns is yellow. And on and on. As far as zones and the settings, no, we don't do that. And the reason for that is we change it constantly. And so if I labeled that, as soon as I started using it, 30 seconds later that would change and I'd have to rip it off and do that stuff. So I just look on the back at the readout and see exactly what the settings are. And so the codes and tapes and stuff are for ownership, but not necessarily for settings. Okay, a couple more. We have like 2 more times for 2 more questions.
Okay, perfect. Eduardo from Brazil asked, some cameras can use the pop-up flash as a commander, like the D7000. When using the flash as a commander, the camera takes the picture after it sends the signals to the off-camera flash, or does the light from the pop-up show up in the photo as well?
Yes, so and we did some tests on this at our studio in Phoenix because we were doing we were shooting some aquarium stuff where we had flashes off camera and we were trying to get these flowers and stuff to be dunked in there and freeze action. It was really cool. And we kept seeing this weird light, and what we realized is even though that flash was sending signals and it wasn't part of the photo, it still was showing up in the photos. So yeah, it will show up if it's close because that light, it's trying to tell things what to do. And so we did find that the pop-up light did actually show up in the reflections on some things. It's not supposed to. Technically, it shouldn't. But Kelsey, I'm right on that. Yeah, yes. Okay, we did some experiment. We're like, this should not happen. And we found that it did.
Okay, and a question. I'm not sure if you've already talked about this, so apologies if you have, or if you're going to, from Tammy B from Denmark. What are the advantages or disadvantages of using master-slave versus that commander mode?
It depends on the camera, and so some cameras have more robust commander modes, and so one of the advantages of using the built-in controls on your camera is that it's easier to get to the dials and switches and tell your flashes what to do. If you have a pop-up flash, that means you just saved yourself a few $100s because you don't have to buy a remote control, so that's a huge advantage because who doesn't want a couple $100 extra bucks? So it's a cost savings to have that built in, and it's much easier to get to those because you're using big boy dials and switches, right, that you can use instead of the little teeny dials and switches that are on most flashes. And so it's just a little bit easier and faster, and you can dial things in quicker.
Thanks.
Okay, let's keep going because we really have a lot more to talk about. And so we've talked about Canon, Nikon, how do you set your flashes in master or remote. Canon calls it master and slave. That is definitely something that is very simple to do, but it's different for every flash and every camera model. So make sure you look at your user manual to see exactly what the steps are for your specific camera. And so we had a lot of people write in and say, hey, on this specific camera and this specific flash, how do I do rear curtain sync or high-speed sync? That's in your user manual. So you know what high-speed sync is, you know what master is, you know what slave is, you know what you need to do. So zip into your user manual. It will tell you, here are the steps. And that will help us out. Okay, one of the other things before we move on, I really want to talk about, because we're giving these away and they're awesome. And if you know me, you know that I am the poster child for Pocket Wizard. I love this stuff. So we have a different option, and these are called the Pocket Wizard Mini and Flex. These are radio triggers. And there's a big, big, big difference between a radio trigger and a line of sight trigger. And I talked earlier, Canon is coming out with a radio trigger for their new flashes that I think is going to be spectacular as well. The problems with line of sight, please, if you haven't watched it, watch last night and you'll see us frustrated with the line of sight remote controls. We rarely ever use them because of the complications we have shooting outside of having to make sure everything can see everything. And so what we normally do when we're shooting with speed lights off camera, we use pocket wizards because they're radio triggers. A radio trigger means that you can get your flash off your camera and you can put your flash just about anywhere you want at really, really crazy distances. And so that's what those do. The other thing what these can do is you can remote control a camera as well. So it's not just for flashes, it's for cameras, but that's a different class, right? So let me show you how to set these things up. We're not gonna go into great detail on this because, again, these would be a class all unto itself. In fact, I've taught classes just on how to use these. You can see those for free at pocketwizard.com, by the way. So anyway, what these do is, these are specific to your camera's brand. These are Nikon Mini Inflexes. We didn't bring any Canon Mini Inflexes with us, so we can only use these on our Nikons. And they're not interchangeable. So you can't put a Canon one on a Nikon or whatever, because the Canon system is different from the Nikon system. So what this does is you can take a transmitter, and there's two flavors of transmitters. There's a big one like this. It's a flex. It can send and receive, but it's really big. You probably don't want something that clunky on your camera. So they made the Mini, which is a smaller version. It's only a transmitter. But you put this guy on your camera, and then what you do is you can take a speed light and you put the speed light in just normal TTL mode. You don't do anything with it. You don't put it on slave or remote or anything. You just turn it on, and then it actually goes onto your flex. And as soon as you turn the flex on, what it does is it takes over the control of the flash. It totally takes over control. And the camera actually thinks that the flash is still on the camera. And so all of the controls that you have, not all of them, but 85% of all the controls that you have with your flash on your camera, you still have, except for now it's remote. And so what you can do is you can stick it at a great distance. Now this guy right here, you have to turn it on, is now going to send a signal over here to this flash. And the cool thing is, because it's radio, notice it doesn't see it. In fact, we can take this and cover it up and we'll put it underneath. We'll put it underneath something right here. Okay, so it absolutely cannot see at all this flash, right? I'm trying too hard. Okay, so it can't see. It's totally hidden. And I can still come over here and flash and fire that, right? And so what we do a lot with radio triggers is we'll take flashes and we'll hide them in lamps. Like if I want to control how this lamp looks, it's easier to put a flash inside that than use the ambient light. And so a lot of times we'll hide flashes in things like that. Let's say we want to shoot, maybe this is an interior shoot for a hotel, and we want to make it look nice and pleasing and warm. We might hide a flash behind the television to add some light behind to give it a little bit of a glow. We might hide some flashes in these translucent panels here to actually light those up. And so you can now start hiding strobes all over the place. Maybe if we were shooting at night and we wanted to make it look like there was daylight coming through here, we'd stick light outside, and it doesn't matter. It can go through the wall. And so the radio triggers give you all kinds of options that you don't have otherwise. And there's all kinds of other features with these guys. I don't want to make an ad for Pocket Wizard, but you get the idea. They're pretty spectacular. So that's the other option that we have for off-camera flash. And there's one more option that we have that isn't out here, but Kelsey's going to bring out a couple of plus threes. She'll grab that, and we'll get to that in a second, because you can trigger off-camera flash manually. So you can use them as normal manual flashes. So you can treat them just like one of these guys, a studio strobe. You can put it up in normal manual mode, and then flashes have something called a sync port. It's this little guy right here on a Nikon. Can you grab some sync cables too? Yes. On Canon flashes, there's a little port to the side right here. That's a sync port. So in the olden days, to get a flash to fire from your camera, there is a little port on the side of your your camera, right there. It's a little PC terminal, and you would have to plug that in and then plug the other into a flash, and that's how the flash would fire. It was an actual cable, and so flashes still have that. They still have this little cable. So what you can do is you can put this in full manual mode, and then you can either use a cable or you can use a radio trigger, and so you don't have to have something that can control your flash. You can just get something like this, which is an inexpensive radio trigger, and then you can take that. These are the wrong ones, Kelsey. The ones for the flashes.
Oh.
You can get that, and you can plug one end into a radio trigger and the other end into your flash, and then you can dial these in manually. And so I know guys like David Hobby and Joe McNally, those guys that are big speedlight guys, do that a lot. And we're going to steal some stuff from Joe McNally that he taught for shooting groups, and we're going to do that. We're going to shoot in all manual mode to really get that stuff going, and we're going to trigger with normal flash triggers, which is going to be sort of cool. Okay, yes, those are for the cameras. We'll get those later. They're in the boxes. We haven't had enough coffee today. You're like, nope, that's not right either. They're actually in the box. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on. It doesn't really matter. Questions before we get to modifiers?
A quick question from XYZ360. Do radio triggers influence on the maximum shutter speed?
Do radio triggers influence maximum shutter speed? No, they don't, because they're fast. So I say no, they don't, but they can. So they can affect, because there is a lag, depending on how far away your flash is, there is that little bit of a lag, and so it's not quite as fast. Maybe one day we'll do a radio trigger only workshop, because yeah, that's a much longer answer. But zip over to pocketwizard.com if you want to know some of the technical stuff about those radio triggers. And I know there are other radio triggers out there, but those I don't know those. So the Pocket Wizards are the ones I know really well. But yeah, there can be a lag, and the +3s, these new guys right here, have some features that help fix that. But you can read about that somewhere else.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mark, you may have already answered this. I'm going to ask it again. Gigi would like to know, is manual triggering more consistent light than TTL?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I have a t-shirt that I was going to wear, but I didn't, and it just says, TTL sucks. Or there's another one that has a big slash through it, TTL. So yeah, TTL, as we saw yesterday when we have those two exposure triangles, you add so much as far as the trusting your camera to get everything right. There's so many different moving parts with TTL, because depending on where you point your lens, what's behind the camera, is there any glare off of something, what's the mood, is the battery, right? All that kind of stuff. You're adding so many different variables that the light from shot to shot can really change, and it's really frustrating. And so my personal style is not to use TTL unless that's the best thing for it. So if I'm shooting an event or a reception or something where I'm moving around and doing things and I'm going to be changing my light a lot, TTL is definitely the way to go. Definitely the way to go. If I'm shooting in the studio where I can control the light, or that example, if I'm shooting a hotel lobby where I'm dialing in light to do an ad or something like that, architectural photography, I would never use TTL for that. Never. I dial in the light so that every single shot it's consistent.